In this lesson, we're going to cover derived parts. A derived part basically is going to be a link back to an existing part or an assembly file where the changes inside of that part or assembly will be driven forward to the derived part. So the file that I currently have open is called derivedpart.ipt, found in your Chapter 8 exercise folder. And you see that it's a symmetric part right now. And what I want to do maybe is go back and work on this. Maybe this will be a casting per se. And what I want to do from that casting is I want to go back and make some changes to it, but I don't want to change the original. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new part file, and then I'm going to return out of the sketch environment. Then from the part features, come back down here and select on derived component. Now from here, go back and select the component that you're going to derive into it, in this case our derived part. Now in the dialog box, this is where we can go back and you can determine what sections of that part do you really want to come forward. So in this case we could derive it as a solid, or in this case we could also go back and say, do we want a work surface? But I'm going to cancel out of that. As you can see, are other pieces of information that we can grab. In this case, all I have is the solid that I care about in this case. If you want it, you could mirror the part. In this case, it's a symmetric part, so really no reason to do that. You could also scale it if you wanted to. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. And you see that it looks like an exact replication of the first part that we took a look at. I'm going to make this top plane the active sketch, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place in some holes. So I'm just going to select these center points. And let's make them through all holes. Go ahead and click OK. So we spin it around. You can see that the holes are definitely there. But you'll notice now in our browser, it shows me that it's got the derivedpart.ipt. If I expand on that and I can right click, I can open up the base component. And of course the base component is our derivedpart.ipt. And you'll notice the holes do not exist in this part. So what happens now if I go back and add another change to this part? So I'm going to go back and let's just draw in a rectangle. And I'm going to go ahead and extrude that. So some big change. And I'm going to go back to our derived part. And you notice it shows up with a lightning bolt. Tells me that it needs updating. So go ahead and click on the update tool. If I spin this around, you can see that that extrusion has definitely come forward. So what I can do now, a couple other options. I can right click, I can suppress the link. So now again, if I go back to the derived part and let's go back and change the thickness of that extrusion from 1 inch, let's make it much shorter. Just take it down to 1/8 of an inch. Again, let's go back to our derived part. And you notice it says that it doesn't require an update because we suppressed that link, and you can see that the icon has changed to show that as well. If I right click again, I can unsuppress. In this case, again, it's telling me now that it's out of date. Click the update to get that change. The other thing that you can do, let's say at some point this is exactly the part that you want to do and you don't want to have those relationships back to the original part, you can right click. You can break that link. So now if I go back to the base part that we have, delete the extrusion, and let's go ahead and save that part, go back to the derive, and you'll see we got the broken link right there. So changes will no longer be reflected in the derived part. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this file, and let's close this one. And I'm going to open up an assembly. And inside this assembly, we have, let me turn off the visibility of this outside part here. I have that same component that we were just working on. And as you can see, I have it buried right inside the base component. And what I want to do here is create a mold. So if I go back and change the display to hidden, you can see that that part's definitely right in the middle. And on this base component, if you will, I also have a work plane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, start up a new part file. So all derived parts start as a new part. I'm going to exit out of the sketch environment. From the part features, go back and click on Derived Component. In this case, I'm going to select the assembly file. Now in the dialog box, we have some other operations that we can do. So we can include the geometry, we can exclude it, meaning that it's going to have no effect on it whatsoever. We can subtract it. We can show the component as a bounding box, basically showing the exterior size of it. Or we can do an intersect, keep what's common between the two. So in this case, what I'd like to do for that inside derived part is we're going to subtract that material because I want to create a cavity. So if I go ahead and click OK, and if I change my display back to a wireframe, it's kind of hard to see. It really doesn't look any different than what I had before, but right now inside here, that is a hollowed out cavity. So I'm going to go back and change my display again back to the shaded. But what I've also done here, if I right click on that derived assembly, I'm going to go back and edit that. I had that work plane in that base part, and what I want to do is I want to reuse that work plane as a splitting edge. So what I'm going to do is click on the other tab. Now from the other tab, you'll notice that I have an entry for each of the parts. So I'm going to expand that base component, and this is where I can come back and tell Inventor what are the pieces of geometry I want it to move forward with. So in this case, I want that work plane to come forward. Go ahead, click OK. And now I can use that work plane as a splitting edge. So from the part features, let's go back and click on split, select the work plane, and in this case I want to split the part, and let's reverse the direction to remove the very top portion of it. Go ahead, click OK, and then let's turn the visibility of that work plane off. If I spin it around, you can see that that change has occurred. Now the same thing can happen. So now let's go ahead and open up our assembly. So we'll open up the base component. What I want to do next is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to suppress that cutout. Go ahead, click Update. And now when I go back to the Derived, again it's going to tell me I have an update. And as you can see, let's again turn off the visibility of that plane. That cutout is no longer there. As you can see, the exact same thing happened inside of this derived assembly as did the part. The changes are going to occur going unilateral from the part to the assembly, in this case to our derived part.